Hello, my friends, wherever you are. It's always my pleasure when I get such a moment that we may share the Word of God. Today, I want us to share a text from the book of Daniel, chapter 1. We are going to read a couple of verses, then I will explain the message that I want us to share. And today's message that I'm sharing, I've entitled it, God Rewards Faithfulness. God Rewards Faithfulness. In the book of Daniel, this is what it says. It says, in the third year of the reign of King Joachim of Judah, Nebuchadnezzar, king of Babylon, came to Jerusalem and besieged it. And the Lord gave Joachim, king of Judah, into his hand with some of the articles of the house of God, which he carried into the land of Shinar to the house of his God. And they brought the articles into the treasure house of his God. Then the king instructed Aspenaz, the master of his eunuchs, to bring some of the children of Israel and some of the king's descendants and some of the nobles, young men in whom there was no blemish, but good-looking, gifted in all wisdom, possessing knowledge and quick to understand, who had ability to serve in the king's palace, and whom they might teach the language and literature of the Chaldeans. And the king appointed for them a daily provision of the king's delicacies and of the wine which he drank, and 3 years of training for them, so that at the end of that time they might serve before the king. Let's move down to verse 8. It says, But Daniel purposed in his heart that he will not defile himself with the portion of the king's delicacies, nor with the wine which he had drunk. Therefore he requested of the chief of the eunuchs that he might not defile himself. My friend, this is a very interesting text that I want us to share today. And it says, talks of him, the Nebuchadnezzar. Once he had besieged Judah and given Joachim into his hands. So the king had a plan that he wanted young men who could be taught the language of the Chaldeans and the literature, young men who had no blemish, young men who had the wisdom, so that they could be trained, because the king intended that after 3 years, he wanted these young men to serve under the king. But as we have just read, that some of the young men from the Hebrew, they were Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, who were also brought in. And the Bible records that when they were brought, the king, of course, portioned some more provision for the food that they had to take. As we have just read, the daily provision of the king's delicacies and the wine of the king. So verse 8 brings out my point of context today, whereby it says, But Daniel purposed in his heart that he will not defile himself with the portion of the king's delicacies, nor with the wine which he drank. Therefore he requested of the chief of the eunuchs that he might not defile himself. So remember, the king has apportioned, or he has said that the young men who could have been chosen, they were going to have a special kind of daily provision of the meals that they were going to take, and they even taking the king's wine. But verse 8 now brings out a point that Daniel himself, being one of them, he decided to excuse himself, to say, no, I'm not ready to defile myself with the portion of the king's delicacies, nor with the wine that he has apportioned unto us. So what is my point? I'm trying to say that here is a young man with his friends who had decided that yes, the king has said that, yes, these things look very appealing, they look very enticing unto us, why not take them in? But he decides to take a different route. He decides to say, no, I'm not going to defile myself. He valued very much his relationship with God. This is a man, though young, he valued his relationship with God, that he could not in any way defile himself by taking the portion of the food and the wine that the king had apportioned for them. I do not know, my friend, how many things maybe that have been offered to you in life. I do not know the things that maybe the world has provided to you or offered to you, or friends have decided to offer to you. And maybe in a way, whether you have fallen victim to that and you have gone in. Remember, anything that is offered to you, you've got to understand the reason behind it. Daniel and his friends knew very well that if they gave in, then they could have been compromised in their relationship with God. So whatever that we do in our lives, understand that if you take up anything that is being offered, it may be a sign of compromising, or it's a point of contact that is going to compromise your salvation. So Daniel decided to say, no, I'm not going to compromise on this. I'm not going to agree to this kind of food and the wine that is being offered. Why? Because it's going to remove me from the relationship that I have with God. So he valued his relationship with God more than what was being offered. Temporal things that were being offered unto him, he was not ready to take them up because they were going to compromise his relationship. I don't know, my friends, wherever you are and whatever you do, how many are the things that you have been offered that maybe have compromised your salvation? How many of the things, my friend, that you have been offered, and at the end of the day, when you fell into that trap, you found out that the result is very bad. You found out that you messed up your life because you accepted to be compromised. You accepted, you looked at those good things. You looked at those appealing things at the moment. You forgot that at the end of the day, it's your salvation that matters. Let me tell you, my friend, and here is a very practical example of a young man who says, no, I'm not going to compromise. And what happened in verse 12, let me read for you, or for us. Verse 12, this is what Daniel requested. He said, please, test your servants for 10 days, and let them give us vegetables to eat and water to drink. Then let our appearance be examined before you, and the appearance of the young men who eat the portion of the king's delicacies. And as you see fit, so deal with your servants. Verse 14, so he consulted with them in this matter, and tested them 10 days. And at the end of 10 days, their features appeared better and the father in flesh than all the young men who ate the portion of the king's delicacies. You see, Daniel said, we are not going to eat of the king's delicacies. We are not going to drink of the wine. Just give us vegetables. And after 10 days, test us and see how our appearance is going to happen. So God, because they purpose to be faithful to God, they purpose not to devour themselves, God in return decided to reward them. How did he reward them? It's here in verse 15, how God rewarded them. He says that at the end of 10 days, their features appeared better and further in flesh than all the young men. You see, when you remain faithful, when they decided and the purpose that they are going to remain faithful, God decided to reward them with their flesh and their health being better than those other men who partook of the king's delicacies. So God will always reward you for your faithfulness. I want to speak to someone this morning or this afternoon, wherever you are, that God will always reward you if you remain faithful in the things of God. If you don't devalue yourself, if you value your relationship with God, God is going to reward you. It doesn't matter how appealing those things may appear. Don't be enticed by the appearance of things. They may be a trap for you, but have the Spirit of God, have the wisdom of God, have the understanding of God to know that it's not everything that is being offered unto you that is for your benefit. Some of them, they are only traps of the enemy. So God decided to reward these young men by their appearing better and farther in flesh than all the young men. So my friend, I want to finish up by saying, as long as you continue remaining faithful to God, either in your family, either in your place of work, either in serving God, in whatever capacity, in whatever area that God has positioned you in, remain faithful. And in a way, you may not know how God is going to reward you. He will reward you in different ways. So, my friend, don't fall into the trap of the enemy. Always be wise. Always be understanding. Always discern and understand that it's not everything that is offered to you that is going to lift you up. Some of them, they are traps of the enemy. So you must understand that God, if you remain faithful, He's going to reward you for your faithfulness. May the Lord bless you.